Let's do it.
Rolls out to the right. 5 seconds to go in the first half. Dante fires deep to the left. Moss caught it at the 11, but now he pitches it to Mo Williams. Touchdown!
You gotta be kidding me!
All right, we are back. Another episode of the Climbing the Pocket podcast. Keeping it moving with our series here, Draft Top Fives. I'm your host, Jayson Brown. You can find me on Twitter at BrownJayson, and I'm here to bring you some analysis from a new voice at Climbing the Pocket. Well, I guess not a new voice, one of the original members of Climbing the Pocket, but at this point, you've been hearing a lot of JR and the analysis that he brings to you here, but we're switching it up, bringing our man Myles in here to give you some of his great analysis from his perspective. So, my man Myles, how you doing, dude?
I'm doing really good, man. I'm excited to jump into this.
All right. Well, I'm excited to get in here, talk about some of these, I guess we'll call them the skill players, the outside players, talk about the guys who win in space, I guess, a little bit here. But before we get to all that, and before we jump into these tight ends, got to remind you, listeners, and again, I know you're sick of it, but if you haven't already, hop on over to climbingthepocket.com, click on the draft guide, go ahead, throw $5 our way. You get the draft guide. Your funds go to charity. You get to learn more about the draft, going to 190 prospects deep, full scouting write-ups. You're getting player comparisons, the best scheme fit for these guys. It's the best value that you can find this draft season. So head on over to Climbing the Pocket, make the purchase. You definitely won't regret it. All right. Now that I got that shilling out of the way, Myles, tight ends. Number 5, talk to me.
Yeah, so overall, this tight end class, the top 5, I think it kind of drops off after the top 5 anyway, so I think this is kind of perfect. The top 5 group in general, they're more pass catchers. I think what you're starting to see in the trend in the NFL is, more tight ends being used as pass catchers more than just primary blockers and kind of doing the dual aspect. So I think number 5 is my guy from Indiana. Big fan of his, Ian Thomas. He's like 6'4", 250 pounds or so. Tested really well athletically at the combine, and dude's got huge hands, Jayson. Like, I think the NFL.com has his hands at 11.5 inches. Like, that's crazy. Like this dude's hands are probably as big as like what Hakeem Nicks had back for the Giants coming out of college. I think he wore like 4X gloves. Is huge. So I like Ian Thomas a lot. Like I said before, most of these guys are straight pass catchers, and that's kind of what Ian Thomas is. He's only pretty much 2 years of production in Indiana, and part of the issues he had in terms of some of his production is, he battled through some injuries as a senior, but overall he's an athletic mismatch, big frame. Like I said, his hands are huge, so he's able to pluck the ball out of the air. He's got quick speed. He's not overly twitchy, but he makes up for it with long speed and his ability to kind of box out safeties and linebackers. And what was good with him is the way he was used in Indiana, because they used him and Simi Cobbs in a similar way, where they were both, I wouldn't just say possession receivers, because Ian Thomas got downfield quite a bit because he was able to beat those safeties and linebackers on out routes, corners, posts, up the seam a lot. So I think that's a big part of his game at the next level, especially if he's not asked to be anything more than a joker tight end, a guy, a mismatch, a receiving threat, because his blocking needs a lot of work. But like I said, like what I would love to see for him is for him to be able to kind of go into a situation where there's already an established tight end, not have big expectations for him, and to be just strictly used as a pass catcher early on.
That's awesome, and it sounds like Teddy's loving that analysis too.
Yeah,
Teddy's hyped tonight.
Teddy's loving my wife's vacuuming right now, so Teddy's huge right now. He's super excited about that.
That is hilarious. Well, let's move this thing along. We're talking about your puppy. We're going to the opposite end of the age scale here for number 4. Who you got for us?
Yeah, we're gonna go to the oldest guy in the tight end group, Hayden Hurst from South Carolina. I think the biggest issue that I have with Hayden Hurst is his age, just because He missed 3 years. He went and played, pro baseball, which is great for him. That's awesome. But that's 3 years that he could have had earlier in his career where he'd still be playing football. So that's 3 years he kind of lost. And he didn't really play high school football. So I think that was part of his issue too. So he'll be 25 when the season starts. And I think, like I said, some of the biggest issues I do have with Hayden Hurst come with the age and not playing in high school and coming into playing football late is just the fact that he misses some of the nuances of the game, understanding, just the ins and outs of playing football and what it takes to be a tight end in terms of blocking and route combinations. He's gotten better as each season's gone on, just because he's super athletic. And I mean, to be honest, he's a little older than most of the guys that he's playing against. So I think that has probably played a little bit of a benefit for him. But he's not afraid to go across the middle. He's, like I said before, he's super athletic, and he finds way. They used him in all different sorts of ways. Kind of, I wouldn't put him on par with Trey Burton, but they used him in like that kind of way where he took reverses, screens. They used him in kind of that, all around Joker way, and that's kind of what you're looking for in this wave of tight ends in the NFL nowadays. So I really like that from Hayden Hurst, but I think his issue is, getting into an NFL camp, and the expectation is for him to contribute early, especially for his age. But, what we've seen is unless he's just used primarily as a receiver, most tight ends don't really contribute too often early on. They're usually used, working on their blocking, working on route running. And so the expectations for him will probably be higher than he'd need, because he needs a little bit more time to kind of figure out the NFL game. So that's kind of why I have him a little lower on my scale.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess moving along here, because who you got at number 3? This is one of the first guys that I'm seeing on your rankings here who really stands out, name that I knew kind of going in. Who's your number 3?
Yeah, this is a guy I think isn't getting enough clout. I just think a lot of people, they see the top guys, and we'll talk about those guys in a little bit, but Mark Andrews at Oklahoma, out of all the prospects that Oklahoma has coming out this year, Baker Mayfield, you have Orlando Brown, and you have some of those, Baker Mayfield kind of just overshadows all of them, but Mark Andrews was on the receiving end a lot of those big plays from Baker Mayfield, and I think he doesn't get enough credit for that. I mean, he's a big dude, 6'5", 260, ran a 4.4. Where's my numbers? Ran a 4.5, or ran in the mid 4.6s, which I think is really good for his size. And he's able to be a mismatch for them. Like, he's able to outjump linebackers and safeties. He's able to box out. Where I think some of his struggles come, obviously he wasn't even used as a blocker, barely. He was mainly used as a wide receiver, kind of in that, not quite to the Bucky Hodges mold of last year, which we don't even need to get into him, Jayson, because I know your feelings on Bucky.
Yeah, you didn't need to do that. You need to bring Bucky up, man. You didn't have to hurt me like that.
That's a lot more of how Mark Andrews is used. Just, he's, spread him out. Like, he lined up tight every once in a while, and just in their basic, I formations at times, but mostly he was used as a wide receiver. He didn't really block too often, and he didn't need to. He kind of worked in space in terms of blocking, so he just took up space instead of taking up a man. So he didn't really have to be too good of a blocker. But he does work really well in space. He runs solid routes. I think one thing that I kind of struggle with him, though, is he doesn't really break tackles. He struggles. He wants to go to bounds. He doesn't want to take too many big hits, which I can understand. You don't want to take too many hits, but I think, if at the next level, if he's not willing to kind of take on some of those safeties and linebackers to try to get more yardage, that could really hurt him.
Yeah, and I think that what you said about him being slept on is really it's really true, because like if you go and you look at some of his measurables, and you go to a site that you well know that I go to probably too often, playerprofiler.com.
Oh yeah.
They comp him to Eric Ebron, and when you look at their testing results, Eric Ebron was a little bit faster than him, but I mean, when you look at their speed scores, they're very similar when you kind of take into account the fact that when you take into the account the fact that Andrews is carrying a bit more weight than Eric Ebron was, and things like that. Like, their agility, neither of them particularly great from an agility standpoint, but Eric Ebron was a very high pick in the draft, and it doesn't seem like Andrews is really getting that steam. and his production was, better. So
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from where he seems to be one of the kind of the forgotten guys in this class when he was prolific, part of that great offense with Baker Mayfield, and has great athleticism for a guy his size. So yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one. Who you got at number 2, man?
Yeah, so these are the cream of the crop, I think, of the tight end class this year. For me, number 2 is the combine warrior, the combine freak, Mike Gesicki. The dude blew up the combine. Like, I don't think we've seen a guy have as good of a combine at the tight end position since maybe Vernon Davis. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Jayson. You probably know a little bit more about that than I do.
Yeah, no, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, when you're talking about Gesicki, again, playerprofiler.com, his 40-yard dash was 95th percentile. His speed score was 95th percentile. His burst score was 99th percentile. His agility was 99th percentile. And which pushes his catch radius at 100th percentile. Yeah, like his testing was off the charts.
It's crazy, and I don't think, and I know people expected him to like jump high because he's a former volleyball player, and I think they expected him to kind of test in some of the explosive drills, but I don't think people expected some of the numbers that they got. Like you said, the 3-cone, he 6'7", like that's crazy for a guy his size. He's 6'5", 250. And then to run the 4.5, 440, all while being able to put up 22 on the bench press. I think that, there's crazy numbers, and he backs it up with his production on the field. Like the other tight ends in this class, he didn't really ask to be used as a blocker because that's not his skill set. And I think when we talk about tight ends, heading down into the new age of the NFL is, guys like Evan Ingram, like they don't need to be primary blockers. You don't need to force these guys into roles that they're not very good at. You can have guys on your team that are reserved to be more blockers than they are pass catchers. So, which helps open things up for a guy like Mike Gesicki because he's a mismatch, like nightmare. If you put him against pretty much he runs and tests like a wide receiver. But he's bigger and thicker than most wide receivers. Like he's kind of built like a Calvin Johnson in terms of his size. And I'm not saying he's Calvin Johnson, but like in terms of size and mismatch opportunities, that's exactly what he is. You put him on the outside against some of the corners. You definitely line him up inside against safeties and linebackers. He's beating those guys 9 times out of 10 in terms of off the line. But I just think some of where he needs the biggest work is just, his refining his route running. I think if he can kind of do that with his athletic skill set, I mean, the sky's the limit for the guy. I mean, like I said, he's a freak. His tape shows it, and they used him in a lot of different ways at Penn State. Even with guys like Deshaun Hamilton, Chris Godwin last year, Saquon Barkley, Gesicki was still able to produce at a high level. So I really like what he brings to the next level, and I kind of see him as more that, it wouldn't surprise me if he snuck into round 1, just based off his athletic profile and kind of what you see on that. It sounds like a lot of people have bumped him up a lot since the combine, which makes a lot of sense because you see him able to back up the numbers. So yeah, I like Gesicki a lot.
Yeah, man, everything you said there, you got me kind of excited, and I'm wondering, like, how did he not make it to your number 1 spot? I guess you're about to tell us. So who do you have at number 1, and how are you gonna top all of the excitement that you just brought with Mr. Gesicki?
The hardest part I had with them is between these two guys was in my rankings because I think they're so close, and I think Goddard in terms of his ball skills overall, I think they're unmatched in the terms of the tight end class this year. I got Dallas Goedert from South Dakota as my number 1 tight end, and his ability just to make a spectacular catch. And I know some of the competition wasn't as good as the guys like Mike Gesicki were playing at Penn State, and Mark Andrews or Hayden Hurst at Oklahoma and South Carolina and stuff like that. But what he's able to do against the competition, the way he's able to pluck the ball out of the air. I mean, the dude's a freak, and I think it wouldn't. He's one of those guys where I think it's more of like an outlier for the school he played at in terms of like, oh, he played against lower level talent, so I think that should knock him down. I don't think that's true. I think if he was at a Big Ten school, Power 5 school, I think he would have been doing a lot of the same things he did at South Dakota State. So he's one of those guys where you look at the tape and it's not about the the players he's facing. It's more about what he's doing and the way he's getting himself open. He's 6'5", he's 6'5", 255, right in that range of a Mike Gesicki, but he runs, I think, in terms of route running, he runs better routes. I think he's a little bit more flexible in the hips, a little more twitchy in terms of, his movements in and out of his route running and his breaks are a little bit better than what I saw from Gesicki on tape. So I think that's probably what separated them the most, is more about the little nuances of route running than anything. That's probably the biggest discrepancy, and it's not like it's by a lot, but Goddard at the next level is going to be able to do things, in my opinion, guys like Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce. He can be used in those ways and be mismatches, and if he's not just forced to be pigeonholed into just blocking and being an inline guy, and if he's you allow him the ability to get out in space, split him out wide and get him a mismatch against a linebacker or safety or some of the shorter corners, I think he's gonna win, and especially in the red zone, the way he's able to make one-handed catches, contested catches, pluck the ball away from his body. There's not a lot of guys that come out of college that can do what he does, and he didn't test in the 40 because he had some injuries. I think he had like a hamstring injury right before the combine, so he never ended up testing running the 40, which I think will probably drop him down some teams' boards just because I know they're like the confirmation of what guys run, but his agility scores, his other scores were really good. And I don't have the exact percentile in front of me, but I'm sure you do, Jayson, in terms of what he's able to do is in the the 3-cone, the broad, the short shuttle, stuff like that. He tested really well.
Yeah, the numbers made it to Twitter, but they haven't been updated everywhere yet because oftentimes the places that will post them, they do a little bit of massaging of the numbers that come out of pro days because as we know, people usually end up going a little bit faster at pro days than they do at the combine. So the numbers haven't made it to mock draftable and they haven't made it up on Player Profiler yet. But I'm inclined to agree with you here, and it aligns with what I'm reading across the board for most people in terms of Dallas Goedert being their number one. The numbers that did post on Twitter in terms of what he did as pro day were super impressive, and the level of dominance that he was able to put up was a
6'8", 3-cone, 407 short shuttle, 35-inch vert, a 10-1 broad. So like he was able to do all that at 257, which is fantastic for a tight end. Kind of in that comparable in terms of some of that, not the vert or quite the broad of Mike Gesicki, but kind of in that higher percentage for sure.
Yeah, the definitely some elite agility there. Well, yeah, I'm convinced. Dallas got it number one. And Myles, got you in the chair, got you ready to go, got you in here for your first go around on the top 5. Just want to say thank you for coming on, recording tonight, getting this first one out of the way. And I feel like I'll be talking to you a little bit more here over the next little bit as we as we roll through these here. But listeners, thank you for sticking with us here. Another episode of Climbing the Pocket podcast. As we said earlier, if you haven't already, make your way on over to climbingthepocket.com. Pick up your copy of JR's Draft Guide. It's only $5. Supports a great cause, and we'll get you some great materials to help you get ready for this draft season. So with that said, Myles, thanks for coming on. Listeners, thanks for listening. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.